Thank you, John, and thank you for having us here. First of all, just to pick up from what Mr. Terzakis mentioned at the previous panel, please let me start by sharing our deepest condolences, of course, to all those who suffered tragic loss at the tragic accident. It is tragic events like this that strengthen our commitment towards developing transport systems which are safer, more resilient, and more people-centric. Now, back to the topic of discussion of this panel. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to give you a little bit the United Nations perspective, a more global perspective on the topic that we are discussing today. The starting point, the core premise is that, from our point of view, is that transport does not stop at borders. And following from this, the key question, the real question is, how do we develop our transport systems in a way that ensures that they reflect this reality, that they are safer, sustainable, in a way that is seamlessly connected to other countries and other regions, and even, might I say, other continents. That's where the role of what we do comes in, because from our point of view, there can be many answers to this question, but from our point of view, the core answer is that we do that by making sure that we all speak the same technical and legal language. This is the core mandate, the raison d'être, of the Inland Transport Committee of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, the body that I have the honor to serve. The Inland Transport Committee at the moment is custodian to 61 UN conventions covering the full spectrum of inland transport, road transport, rail, inland water combined, and also vehicles regulations, the vehicles that you drive, the regulations are done under our purview, transport of dangerous goods and what have you. And all of this in the service of building sustainable transport systems. Now, the key question is how, how all of this comes together in support of sustainability. We have three core clusters of work. One of them is indeed connectivity and transport facilitation. We handle conventions like the TIR and its digital version, ETIR, CMR, Harmonization Convention, precisely to support seamless connectivity through borders, which in turn supports trade, economic development, economic growth. The second core cluster of what we do is, of course, transport safety, with a special emphasis on road safety. We're the custodian of the UN Conventions on Road Safety. And I will not go into further details now, but happy to discuss further. Because of that, also UNECE hosts the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety, Mr. Jean Todt, and the UN Road Safety Fund, which has catalytic impact with projects in more than 100 countries, and again, building on the strengths that UNECE has in those fronts. The third category is the environmental and climate performance of inland transport. Here, our impact is both through regulatory means, for example, vehicle regulations, and promoting environmental performance of vehicles, but also policy, for example, through the ITC strategy on decarbonizing inland transport. Just to give you a sense, only a few months ago, for the first time ever, we had the chance to organize an event during COP29 at Baku, a joint event between ICAO, IMO, and ourselves, covering the full spectrum of UN agencies responsible for the various sectors. So ICAO for civil aviation, IMO for maritime transport, and UNECE, the Inland Transport Committee, for inland transport. So this is a heavy constellation of functions and work streams, which somehow, and with that I pass to the second part of my intervention, somehow link to rail, which brings all of them together. Now, on rail, we're responsible for some 10 conventions which are critical, but I would like to give you highlights of only two aspects of them so that you see how the answer to my earlier question, how do we go on transport beyond, which is seamless beyond borders, is relevant. One of our core foundational agreements is AGC, the European Agreement on Main International Railway Lines, which sets up and creates the e-railway network, equivalent to the e-road network. Looking at it from the passenger perspective, this foundational convention has recently been enriched with the international railway passenger hubs, which are indeed trying to make travel of passengers, international travel of passengers by rail, more easy, cheaper, and more intuitive for the end user. We're now, in fact, trying to go one step further and harmonize provisions in relation to passenger information in stations and hubs, again, to make the journey easier for all. On freight transport, which is also key, here the big news, I will just indicative mention because there are more, but the latest development is the so-called Convention on the Contract for the International Carriage of Goods by Rail, which is in the process of being entering into force. And this will make freight transport more efficient, more economic, more competitive compared to other alternatives. Certainly the trade between Asia and Europe. Why? Because it creates one legal and liability regime and one consignment node. Why are we confident that this will enter into force soon? A, because it makes a lot of sense, but B, because China, Germany, and Netherlands have just now been signatories, and that's a spoiler alert, but Greece has not yet done that. It might make sense to consider it. Because indeed, this will make a fragmented regime with the two liability regimes and legal regimes under OTIF and OECD under a single umbrella of the Unified Railway Law. This, to conclude the substantive part, if I could allow me one concluding sentence in a broader reflection. I heard it today from many of the speakers who pointed out that these are weird times. There were many ways of saying that. The way we articulate it is that these are challenging times for multilateralism, and that increases the risks of the transition towards sustainable transport. Fragmentation indeed increases the chances of decreases in cooperation, which is something which we don't want to see. We, as UN, UNECE, and Inland Transport Committee, have a proven model across time and over space of putting treaty-based agreements and cooperation among states as the foundation of their cooperation. These are lasting instruments which have proven effective time and again, and they make sure that we live in a world where rules matter, borders connect rather than divide, and, if you wish, cooperation prevails over conflict. And I'll leave it there. Thank you for having me.